I never thought my college graduation day would double as the sweetest revenge I'd ever taste. As I stood on the stage, just a few feet away from my younger brother Matteo, both of us in matching black gowns, caps clutched tight in nervous hands, I could still hear my parents' words ringing in my ears, as sharp and cold as the night they first said them. He deserves it. You don't. My name is Natalia Reyes, and I'm 24 years old. And today, I want to tell you how that single sentence carved a scar into my soul, and how I spent 4 long, brutal, unforgiving years turning that scar into something stronger than steel. If you've ever been treated like a footnote in your own family, if you've ever been told you're less than, even after giving everything you had, then this story is for you. Drop a comment below where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever had to claw for something that others were simply handed. From the outside, we looked like any proud, middle-class American family. Our 2-story home in Austin had blue shutters, a basketball hoop out front, and a well-manicured lawn my dad obsessively trimmed every Saturday. People would look at us and think, now there's a picture-perfect household. But pictures lie. My parents, Dr. Carolina Reyes, a respected pediatrician, and Professor Miguel Reyes, a tenured lecturer in Latin American studies, believed deeply in legacy, in achievement, and in putting their full weight behind the child they thought would carry the family name furthest. Spoiler: that child wasn't me. From the time we were kids, my little brother Matteo was the golden one. 2 years younger than me, but always somehow ahead in their eyes. He was charming, athletic, a natural at math and science. By age 10, he was already being called Dr. Reyes Jr. And me? I was the quiet one, the artsy one. I doodled floor plans on napkins and could lose myself for hours designing buildings out of Legos. My dream? To become an architect, someone who built beauty from nothing. But dreams like mine were labeled impractical in my family. Architecture? My dad scoffed once. That's a hobby, not a profession. You'll end up broke, Natalia. No matter how hard I tried, AP classes, honor roll, summer internships, I always seemed to fall short of the standard Matteo hit effortlessly. Christmas mornings told the story best. He'd unwrap the latest gadgets, VR sets, or sleek new laptops. I'd get sketch pads from the dollar store, or a pair of plain black sneakers for school. Whenever I questioned the difference, Mom would say, "Matteo needs these things for his future, mija. You've always been more independent." Even at 10, I understood what that meant. It meant less. School events only magnified the divide. For Matteo's science fairs, both my parents would take days off work to help him build elaborate models and presentations. For my art showcases, Mom might swing by during her lunch break, if her schedule allowed. I wasn't angry. Not then. I was hollow, like I'd been measured and found unworthy. The only person who saw me was my Aunt Lucia, Mom's estranged sister, a once promising muralist who had been branded the black sheep of the Reyes family after she dropped out of med school to pursue art full-time. She had no degree, no prestige, but every summer, when I'd visit her studio in Dallas, she treated me like I was already somebody. "You see the world differently, Nat," she told me once as we sat beneath stained glass windows, painting side by side. "Don't let their tunnel vision shrink your future." Lucia was the only one who ever asked me what I wanted, not what made sense on paper. By senior year of high school, I was exhausted from trying to earn my parents' approval. I knew they had been saving for college since we were kids, but I told myself, it'll be okay. They'll see how hard I've worked. I've kept a 4.0 GPA. I've done the internships. They'll be proud. I clung to that fragile hope like it was my last breath. The night the acceptance letters arrived, I remember the scene vividly. I opened mine in the kitchen, my hands trembling. I'd gotten into the University of Chicago's urban design program, one of the top in the country. I told my family over dinner, smiling, expectant. Dad looked up from his phone. That's nice. 10 minutes later, Mateo burst through, the front door waving his acceptance letter from Caltech. The house exploded with celebration. Champagne for the adults, screams, dancing. They even ordered cake. My announcement had evaporated into the air. And then, 2 weeks later, came the dinner that changed everything. The night they said it out loud. The night my father folded his hands on the table, smiled at Mateo, and said, "We've been saving for your education since you were born. Caltech's tuition is high, but we can cover it. You won't have to worry about a thing." I blinked. Wait. What about me? A heavy silence. Mom reached over and touched my hand, her voice syrupy and cold. "We just can't afford both, sweetheart. And you've always been the resourceful one. Architecture's uncertain. Mateo has a clear future. We believe he'll give us a better return on investment." Then came the sentence, "I'll never forget. He deserves it. You don't." And just like that, my last illusion shattered. That night, I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't scream or argue. I simply went upstairs, shut my door, and let the pain consume me. But somewhere, beneath the tears and the betrayal, a fire began to burn. And that fire would fuel everything that came next. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, that faded poster of Frida Kahlo still taped to the wall, and I let the words play over and over in my mind like a cruel lullaby. He deserves it. You don't. My parents had drawn the line, drawn it in ink. Bold, thick, undeniable, and I had been left on the wrong side. The next morning, my eyes were puffy, my throat raw. But I walked downstairs like nothing had happened. I ate toast in silence as Mateo scrolled through dorm room Pinterest boards, and Dad printed out Caltech's orientation schedule. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked if I was okay. I was invisible again, except this time, I wasn't going to accept it. "I'm going," I said quietly, putting my plate in the sink. "To Chicago. I'll figure it out on my own." My mother blinked. "Natalia, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I cut in, voice sharper than I'd intended. "I'm being decisive. You said you can't help me. Fine. I'll help myself." Dad folded his arms. "You don't know what it takes. Scholarships don't fall from the sky. You'll be drowning in debt before you even start." "I'd rather drown fighting," I replied, "than float in a house where I'm not seen." I left before they could respond. That weekend, I packed my bags and drove 2 hours to Dallas to stay with the only person who had ever seen my potential, Tia Lucia. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a hug. "I take it your parents finally did something unforgivable," she said softly. I broke down in her arms. Through broken sobs, I told her everything. The acceptance, the dinner, the betrayal. How they'd saved for Mateo. How they said I didn't deserve the same. Lucia listened, her hand never leaving mine. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "You'll be okay." What she said was something else entirely. Sometimes the people who are supposed to believe in us are the ones with the smallest imaginations. But that doesn't mean we stop dreaming. That night, I slept in a small guest room filled with canvases and paint-stained aprons. The smell of turpentine and old ideas surrounded me. It felt more like home than my actual house ever had. The next morning, I opened my laptop and created a document titled Natalia Reyes Survival Plan. It had 3 categories: financial aid, jobs near campus, scholarships. I applied to every grant, award, and need-based assistance I could find. I spent hours on essays, rewriting and reworking each sentence until my fingers cramped. Lucia helped me edit, her red pen flying with precision and passion. "Take the sting of what they said," she told me, "and turn it into steel." Over the next 6 weeks, I turned into a machine. I filed FAFSA. I met with admissions counselors remotely. I secured a partial scholarship that would cover about 30% of my tuition. I applied for federal loans, and with Lucia's help as a co-signer, was approved for enough to at least start. Next came the housing nightmare. While Mateo toured sleek dorms with private bathrooms and skyline views, I scoured Facebook forums and student housing apps. I ended up finding a tiny shared apartment in South Chicago. 4 roommates, 1 bathroom, mold in the corners, and no AC. But it was mine. For income, I emailed every cafe, bookstore, and print shop within walking distance of campus. I landed 2 jobs: morning barista shifts from 6 a.m. to 10:30, evening hours at a used bookstore from 6:00 p.m. until close. I created a color-coded spreadsheet of every expense: rent, textbooks, transit, food. There was no room for error. Not even $10. On the day Mateo moved into his plush dorm in California, Mom posted a photo online. "So proud of our boy. Future engineer in the making." There was no post about me. No proud of Natalia moment. But that's when I realized, maybe I didn't need their spotlight. Maybe I could build my own stage. When I arrived in Chicago, everything felt impossibly big. The city swallowed me up in cold wind and concrete and noise. My apartment smelled like mildew and old takeout. One of my roommates cried every night through the walls. Another practiced screamo guitar at 1 a.m. But on that first night, as I lay on a mattress I bought for $25 from Craigslist, I whispered out loud, "This is the beginning." I was terrified, but I was free, and I was going to turn that freedom into fire. Freshman year didn't just hit me, it bulldozed me. Every morning started before the sun. I'd roll out of bed at 4:45 a.m. in that freezing shoebox apartment, throw on my thrifted barista uniform, and hike 15 minutes through wind-slicked sidewalks to the cafe. I worked the early shift at Roast and Revel, a cramped corner coffee shop that smelled like ambition and burned espresso. The owner, Craig, was perpetually hungover, but liked me because I didn't complain. Even when I took out the trash in sub-zero weather or unclogged sinks full of milk curdles. At 10:30 sharp, I'd clock out, wolf down a granola bar, and sprint across town for my 11 a.m. urban design lecture. My backpack felt like it weighed more than I did. Laptop, notebooks, 2 secondhand textbooks I couldn't afford to replace if they tore. I took classes until 4:30 p.m., then headed home for a quick power nap if my screamo roommate wasn't rehearsing. By 6, I was clocked into my second job, shelving books and ringing up used paperbacks at Second Chapter, a dusty little shop tucked between a pawn store and a pawn shop that also sold tacos. I worked until 10 p.m., then rode the shaky red line train back to the apartment, clutching my backpack like a life vest. Homework happened between midnight and 2 a.m. Some nights I passed out face first on my laptop, the cursor blinking beside an unfinished paragraph on zoning laws. Sleep was a rumor. Money was a ghost. But my dreams, those were real. Those were loud. In the chaos, something amazing started to happen. While most of my classmates struggled to adapt, I was thriving in ways no one expected. My work ethic was sharper. My time management, ruthless. I'd spent years being overlooked, so I'd trained myself to over-prepare. Every sketch I turned in was detailed. Every group project I led finished early. Every professor I met began to remember my name, especially Professor Ira Gold. He taught design and human behavior, a class most students dreaded. But I loved it. The way design could influence emotion, movement, even hope. It lit something up inside me. One afternoon after class, he stopped me on my way out. "You have a sharp eye for flow," he said. "Your critique of the Pilsen redevelopment project? That wasn't undergrad thinking. That was intuitive." I blinked. "Thank you, sir. I actually spent a lot of time in that neighborhood last weekend." He nodded. "Keep showing up like this. I want to see where you take it." That validation? It lit a match in the dark. But it wasn't just school that began to shift. So did my survival strategy. I noticed how small businesses in my area lacked proper signage, ugly menus, poorly designed flyers. On a whim, I offered to redesign a sandwich shop's chalkboard, menu in exchange for a free week of lunches. The owner loved it so much he paid me anyway, and asked for business cards. Blueprint Socials was born that night. I didn't have an LLC or a business plan, just a Canva account, a used iPad, and a willingness to work until my eyes blurred. I made logos for local bakeries, flyers for yoga studios, and once, a 12-page brand guide for a dog-walking startup run by 3 ex-military veterans with surprisingly strong opinions about fonts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And every design I finished felt like a brick in the foundation I was secretly building beneath my future. Meanwhile, Mateo's Instagram was filled with photos of him at frat parties and beach trips, posing with his sleek MacBook and custom dorm setup. Mine had filtered pictures of sketchbooks, chai-stained blueprints, and captioned coffee shop sunsets that only I understood. I don't know if my parents noticed. I don't know if they ever wondered how I was doing. But I knew this much. I was building a life they never planned for. One that didn't need their approval. One that, maybe one day, they would wish they'd supported. By the end of my first year, I'd become a quiet force in my department. I wasn't flashy, and I didn't have time to join clubs or hang around after class, but my name started showing up in whispered conversations after lectures, on bulletin boards beside winning projects, and in emails from professors asking if I'd consider submitting work to national design platforms. One of my infographics, an adaptive reuse proposal for an abandoned public library, was featured on a major urban planning blog. My professors called it brilliant. My parents didn't even know it existed. But it didn't matter. At least, that's what I told myself. Meanwhile, Blueprint Socials was gaining momentum. I officially registered it as a freelance business and began charging real rates. $100, $250, even $500 for multi-page visual packages. Each payment helped chip away at the weight on my shoulders. I stopped skipping meals. I bought a proper desk. I even replaced my cracked phone screen. One weekend, I surprised myself by sleeping 8 hours straight for the first time in months. It felt like luxury. And then came the moment that made time stop. It was a Wednesday afternoon in September, a few weeks into sophomore year. I was in the middle of editing a branding deck for a community garden when my phone buzzed with a message from Lucia. "Hey, mija, can you call me when you have a minute?" No rush. No rush. That's how she always softened bad news. I stepped outside the coffee shop and dialed her. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but thinner than usual. She told me the test results had come back. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. I couldn't speak. I stood there on the corner of Halsted and 18th, the wind whipping through my coat, people rushing past with plastic bags and earbuds and laughter, and I was frozen. Lucia, my anchor, the only adult who had ever believed in me without conditions, was sick. And worse, she hadn't told anyone else in the family. "They don't get to pretend they care now," she said firmly. "I just wanted you to know first." I offered to come to Dallas. She refused. "Your life is moving, Nat. Keep going. That's the best medicine you could give me." But I didn't sleep that night. Suddenly, everything felt fragile again. All the stability I'd scraped together, rent paid, classes aced, a business, growing, it began to wobble under the weight of fear. For the first time in over a year, I almost cracked. But then I remembered what Lucia had said to me the first time I told her my parents wouldn't pay for college. "Your gift is bigger than their vision." She hadn't been wrong. So I made a promise to myself that night. I wouldn't let this break me. I channeled everything, my grief, my anxiety, my need to do something, into my work. By October, I had a waiting list of small businesses begging to work with Blueprint Socials. I created brand guides, interior design layouts, even 3D mock-ups for shop fronts, all while keeping up a full course load and working weekends at the bookstore. One of my clients, a quirky tea house owner named Mia, happened to be married to an architect who sat on the National Urban Design Fellowship Board. She loved my work so much, she sent him a link to my online portfolio. A week later, I received an anonymous email. "Consider applying for the NUD Fellowship. We're looking for visionaries who understand beauty and grit." I stared at the screen for a full 5 minutes. The fellowship was the big one, a national competition offering $25,000 in grant funding and professional mentorship with leaders in design and sustainability. The kind of thing that changed lives. The kind of thing kids like Mateo were prepared for, groomed for. Not girls like me who built from scraps. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. I printed the application form that night, and I started drafting a proposal I hoped would shatter every low expectation that had ever been put on my name. Thanksgiving break came faster than I expected. Campus emptied out. The coffee shop cut back hours. My roommates scattered to warm homes and noisy kitchens. I stayed behind, partly because I couldn't afford the flight, partly because I didn't want to sit at a table where my seat had always been optional. I texted Lucia, "Thinking of you this week. I'll make extra pie just for you." She replied, "I'll be thinking of you every minute." But then, on Tuesday, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside, a gray knit sweater, a bus ticket, and a note in Lucia's unmistakable cursive. "You deserve a place at the table, Nat. Go remind them." I stared at the ticket for a long time, and on Wednesday night, I boarded a 14-hour overnight bus back to Austin. The house looked the same. Perfect lawn, tastefully arranged pumpkins on the porch, holiday lights along the windows. From the outside, nothing had changed. But I had. The door opened, and my mother blinked like she hadn't expected to see me. "Oh, Natalia, you didn't say you were coming." I smiled politely. "Didn't know I needed an invitation." She stepped aside. Well, come in. Inside, the decorations were over the top. Fall leaves, candles, centerpieces. The table was set for 15. Mateo's graduation announcement was framed beside the wine bottles. I wasn't on display, not even a photo from college. Mateo bounded over, grinning. Look who made it. The mystery woman from Chicago. I hugged him. He was genuinely happy to see me, maybe for the first time in years. You look different, he said, studying me. Confident. I had to be, I replied. No one sent me instructions. Dinner was loud, full of relatives I hadn't seen in years. My aunts and uncles took turns praising Mateo. So proud of this boy, graduating in just a few months. Already getting job offers, right? Such a bright future. I smiled, kept sipping my cider, until Uncle Julio, my mom's older brother, and a retired contractor spoke up. What about Natalia? He asked, looking directly at my parents. I heard she's doing some fancy design thing. Got a feature in a blog or something? The room quieted slightly. Dad cleared his throat. Oh, yes. She's been busy with her little freelance work. Little freelance work. I forced my smile wider. She's always been independent, Mom added quickly. Doesn't like us interfering. Uncle Julio frowned. So, no celebration for her too? No proud display? Dad laughed awkwardly. Let's not turn this into a competition. I stood slowly. No need. I'm not competing with Mateo, I said calmly. I'm just existing, quietly, without banners or champagne. You could hear the fork my cousin dropped on his plate. I've submitted for the National Urban Design Fellowship, I added. Finalists are announced next semester. A few people clapped politely. My father looked more annoyed than impressed. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You know how competitive those things are. I nodded. Absolutely. That's why I've been working 2 jobs, running a business, and keeping a 4.8 GPA just to maybe have a shot. Silence. Then Uncle Julio clapped his hands. Now that deserves a toast. We raised our glasses. Mine shook slightly in my hand. That night, as dishes were cleared and laughter returned to safer topics, my mother caught me alone in the kitchen. You didn't need to make a scene, she said in a hushed voice. I didn't, I replied. I answered a question. She looked down, straightened a napkin that didn't need straightening. Your uncle doesn't understand the full picture, she said. We've always wanted what's best for both of you. No, I said quietly. You wanted what looked best. You chose safety. Mateo fit that mold. I didn't. Her eyes flashed. That's not fair. Neither was choosing to invest in only one child, I said, turning to leave. But life isn't fair, right? That's what Dad always says. I didn't wait for her answer. Back in my room, I pulled out my laptop and opened the fellowship proposal draft. The cursor blinked. Ready. I typed the first line. What happens when you're expected to be small and choose instead to expand? The email came on a rainy Thursday in February. I was sitting on the cold library floor, surrounded by sketches, models, and empty coffee cups, when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was a late payment notice from my internet provider, or a client asking for a last-minute revision, but it wasn't. Subject line: Congratulations, you are a finalist. I stared at the screen, unmoving. Then I clicked. Dear Natalia Reyes, we are thrilled to inform you that you've been selected. As one of 3 finalists for the National Urban Design Fellowship, your submission stood out for its innovation, sustainability focus, and practical community application. You will be invited to present your project live in April. The winner will be announced at the national conference in Chicago. I read it 3 times. Then I stood up, stepped into the hallway, and screamed. A few students turned to stare. One even clapped. I didn't care. After years of silence, after being told you don't deserve it, someone, somewhere had said, "Yes, you do." Meanwhile, Mateo's golden track began to rust. At first it was whispers, something about a company rescinding their offer. Then came the full story. One of his prospective employers discovered the old academic dishonesty report buried deep in his record. The university hadn't expelled him thanks to our parents' advocacy, but they had flagged it. And now, it had resurfaced. He called me one night. "I don't know what to do, Nat," he said, voice hollow. "They pulled the offer, and the other ones are ghosting me." I sat quietly for a moment. Then I said, "Maybe it's time you figure it out without them." There was a long pause. "You mean without Mom and Dad?" "I mean without expecting people to save you." Another pause. Then quieter. "Like you did?" That landed like a weight between us. In March, my business hit a milestone. 10 active clients, including a growing co-working space and a grassroots urban farming initiative. I hired 2 other design students part-time and created official internship credits for them through the university. Blueprint Socials wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving. At the same time, I received an unexpected email from Dean Ramirez, head of the School of Architecture. "Natalia, your name came up unanimously when faculty discussed this year's commencement speaker. We would be honored if you would represent the graduating class." I had to read the message twice. Commencement speaker? Me? The girl they said had no future? I replied with a single line. I would be honored. I didn't tell my parents, not yet. The university would announce the speaker list 2 weeks before graduation. I wanted it to hit them like a lightning strike. Because if they hadn't seen me by now, they didn't deserve a soft reveal. In late March, I began rehearsing my speech between classes and client meetings. Lucia, recovering from another round of chemo, helped me refine the wording over nightly video calls. "You're not just speaking for you," she reminded me. "You're speaking for every girl who's ever been told she wasn't enough." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I know." As April approached, so did the final round of the fellowship competition. It was held in a converted train station downtown, an open space filled with banners, booths, and judges in tailored suits. I presented my project, a community-centered redevelopment plan for underused urban zones using modular, low-cost design and local labor partnerships. I spoke from the heart. I spoke from experience. And when I stepped off the stage, one of the judges shook my hand and said, "You're going to change the way people think about neighborhoods." 2 weeks before graduation, the campus newspaper released its annual spotlight issue. Front page: student entrepreneur, fellowship finalist, commencement speaker, meet Natalia Reyes. They used a photo of me standing in front of one of my design prototypes, wind in my hair, blueprint in hand. I sent the article to Lucia. She called, crying. My parents? Nothing. No message, no phone call. But I knew they had seen it, because Mateo texted me that night. They're quiet. Shook. Mom's been walking around with the paper folded under her arm like it's a mistake. I smiled at my screen. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them sit in silence. Because soon, everyone would hear what I had to say, whether they were ready or not. The morning of graduation was crisp and cloudless, as if the sky itself had cleared to make way for what was coming. I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny apartment, slipping into the simple navy blue dress I'd saved 3 months to buy. Not flashy, but structured, sharp, professional. Over it, I placed my black gown. Then finally, with shaking hands, I wrapped Lucia's gift, a hand-embroidered stole, around my shoulders. It read, "They didn't see you coming. Now they can't look away." On campus, the air buzzed with celebration. Families clutched cameras and bouquets. Laughter rang through the quad. I found my place in line near the front of the procession, surrounded by classmates in robes and caps, each one adorned with glitter, slogans, or stitched initials. Mine was plain except for a silver pin shaped like a house, Lucia's. A few rows ahead stood Matteo, chatting with friends. He turned, saw me, and nodded respectfully. It wasn't the smug smile he wore at 18. It was quieter, humbled, maybe even proud. As we filed into the auditorium, I scanned the crowd. It took less than a second to spot my parents. Front row seats, of course. Dad in his stiff navy blazer. Mom in her finest floral dress, clutching a leather-bound program. Their eyes followed Matteo proudly as he took his seat. They hadn't noticed me yet, but they would. After the formalities, the university president stepped up to the podium. "And now," he said, "we turn to a very special moment, our commencement address, delivered by one of this year's most exceptional graduates." I felt my stomach twist, but not with fear, with power. Please join me in welcoming Natalia Reyes, School of Architecture. The entire auditorium turned as I stood. Gasps, applause, whispers. And there, my parents' faces, a frozen portrait of confusion, then dawning recognition and disbelief. I walked to the stage, took a deep breath, and began. 4 years ago, I arrived on this campus alone, not in spirit, but in support. I came without a safety net, without a family cheering me on from day one, without funding, without a plan. But I came with something else, the will to rise anyway. A silence fell over the crowd, not just the polite kind, the lean-in kind. I worked 30 hours a week. I took 18 credits per semester. I built a business from scratch, Blueprint Socials, that now serves over a dozen real-world clients. I coached underclassmen. I mentored interns. I paid my rent. I bought my groceries. I failed. I kept going. And today, I graduate with highest honors. A low murmur swept through the room. But I wasn't done. I was told once, by people who should have believed in me, that I didn't deserve the same opportunities as someone else in my family, that I wasn't worth investing in. But standing here, I see now. Their failure to see me wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their limits, not mine. The applause began slowly, then surged like a wave. Even the faculty stood. I paused, then said softly, "To anyone out there who's ever been underestimated, let them. Use it. Become the proof that they were wrong." As I stepped back from the podium, the president returned to the mic. "Thank you, Ms. Reyes. That was extraordinary." He smiled, then opened a folder. "But there's more." My heart skipped. In recognition of Ms. Reyes's exceptional academic and entrepreneurial accomplishments, we are proud to name her as this year's valedictorian. Gasps, applause. And winner of the National Urban Design Fellowship, awarded to only one student in the nation. The auditorium erupted, but the final blow hadn't landed yet. The president looked out over the sea of stunned faces. "And what many of you may not know," he said, voice steady, "is that Ms. Reyes achieved all of this while fully self-financing her education, working multiple jobs, running a business, and receiving no financial support from her family." You could feel the shift. Eyes turned toward my parents. I looked too. Their expressions? Pale, stiff, lost. Everything they'd dismissed was now being applauded, publicly, universally, unavoidably. The president continued. "In honor of her resilience, we're proud to announce a new scholarship, the Natalia Reyes Fellowship, to support students who demonstrate extraordinary perseverance in the face of adversity." The audience rose in unison, a standing ovation. Beside me, my classmates clapped through tears, and in the front row, my father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother dabbed at her eyes, but whether it was pride or shame, I couldn't tell. Honestly, it didn't matter. After the ceremony, the graduates poured out into the sunlit quad like a wave of black and gold. Laughter, hugs, photographs, bouquets. But I walked slowly, not because I was tired, but because I knew what was waiting for me at the edge of the crowd. Them. I spotted my parents near a tree by the administration building. They stood awkwardly, too stiff for celebration, too proud to leave. Lucia had flown in for the ceremony and was chatting with my roommate Zoe and Professor Gold nearby. She caught my eye, gave me a thumbs up, then turned her back to let me decide what came next. I approached slowly. Dad was the first to speak. "Well," he said, voice a little too cheerful, "that was quite something." Mom nodded, face tight. "We had no idea. You've clearly been busy." I said nothing. Dad shifted. "You could have told us about the award, the speech." I met his eyes. Calm. Clear. "You never asked." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Then Mom tried again. "We are proud of you, Natalia." I tilted my head. "Are you proud of me, or just surprised that the daughter you dismissed outperformed your expectations?" She blinked. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. Mateo appeared then, slipping into the space beside me. "Just say it," he told them. "You messed up. You chose one kid and left the other to drown." His voice wasn't angry, just tired. "Nat saved herself. You don't get to take credit now." My father's jaw tightened. "We thought we were doing what was best." "No," I said. "You did what was easy. You chose the child who looked like a safe bet. I was a risk, and you never took it." Mom stepped forward. "Can we start over? Build something new?" I looked at them. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't feel small in front of them. I felt free. "I don't need to rebuild what was broken," I said quietly. "I've built something better. Without you." They flinched. Not from cruelty, from truth. "I'm not closing the door forever," I added. "But if you want to be in my life, you'll have to meet me where I actually am, not where you left me." They nodded, slowly, unsure, uncomfortable. but it was a start. Later that evening, we held a quiet celebration in the design building. Lucia stood beside me in her red scarf, beaming. Zoe brought cupcakes. Professor Gold toasted with plastic champagne flutes. Mateo showed up late, carrying a small gift bag. "I got you something," he said. "Nothing fancy, just something I thought you'd actually use." Inside was a heavy leather sketchbook and a pen engraved with 3 words, "I see you." I swallowed hard. He grinned. "I'm still kind of a mess, but you make me want to be better." I nodded. "That's enough." Weeks later, I moved to New York City. My apartment was modest, but bright, paid for by the fellowship grant. My clients were thriving. The scholarship named after me had received its first 120 applicants. And one afternoon, I received a letter from the university. "We are thrilled to offer you a full-ride MBA spot, should you ever choose to return." That summer, I sat beside Lucia on her porch in Dallas, watching the sun bleed over the city skyline. "I kept this for you," she said, handing me a slim velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, engraved with a single phrase, "Build what they said you couldn't." "It was my grandmother's," she said. "She gave it to me when I walked away from med school. I knew one day I'd give it to a girl who made her own path." I clasped it around my wrist. It was a perfect fit. 1 year later, the first recipient of the Natalia Reyes Fellowship stood on that same stage where I once declared my worth. She was 20, a former foster kid, first-generation college student, waitressing full-time. She wore the same embroidered stole I had worn, and as she raised her diploma in triumph, I understood something I hadn't grasped before. My success wasn't revenge. It was renewal. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And now, I wasn't just surviving. I was designing futures. Mine. Theirs. And everyone they once said wasn't worth investing in.